It's a great time to be here to celebrate you, Pat. And here, our colleague today, our Professor Pat, has been with the university just a few years, since September of 1987. You can just put your head down if you were born after 1987. Pat came here from having done her degrees in Iowa, but originally from Pittsburgh area. And maybe he was thinking a couple years, and then a few years more than that, and more than that, and more than that. And your lifetime
suddenly.
And suddenly, we all have gray hair or no hair. Taught a wide variety of things, but particularly drawing. And as a colleague of Pat's, obviously Pat brings a very quiet presence, but a very kind presence. The thing I've just been overwhelmed with working with Pat has been your faithfulness, but your incredible kindness, particularly as we were navigating things here, and you just bring such a calming experience. You're just so zen in what you do. So just appreciate who you are. And she's going to share with us today. We want to offer a couple gifts for Pat. First gift we want to provide for Pat is a little Haitian-made art, okay? That supports a Haitian artist with a little candle in here about positive energy, because that's what you bring to the space, okay? And then, of course, the other thing is a small globe, because what I'm taken by, Pat, is all the years of your teaching that really your influence and your love for art has probably spanned the globe, right? And of course, your most focused empathy, of course, started with a journey in Guatemala, but now your love and empathy has gone throughout the world. So we really greatly appreciate who you are, and we turn the floor over to you.
So I had, in collecting this exhibit, and being ready for retirement, there's a lot of time for reflection, okay, and thinking about the meaning of art and what it means to me. So I have reduced my reflections to a story, some personal observations about what art means to me, and I will end up with a few words of wisdom for you. So the story, before I came to Pikeville, I spent a year in Valley, Washington. The drawing behind you is from that area. Valley is just north of Spokane, a rural area. And I was staying at a house of a former grad teacher. He and his family would spend a year in Iowa, where I went to school, and then in the summer they would come to the house. So I was there through the academic year. Okay. And one of my jobs there to maintain the house was to cut the grass. I hate cutting grass. It is dirty, it is noisy, and 7 days later you have to do it again. Okay, so it is over ongoing. And this was rough lawn. I mean, it was out in the country, so it had a very rough surface. So I ended up hiring a neighborhood kid to cut the grass for me. And it would take roughly 3 to 4 hours because there was so much of it, and it was in little nooks and crannies. And one time, he came and I took him out water, and just to see how he was doing. And Zach was so proud of himself. He says, "I've cut you some more yard. Okay, I've gone into the field and cut some more yard for you because I thought you would like it." And I'm just, what the heck? So no redeeming feature, but he was so proud of himself and was so pleased. And so I thanked him with a question mark, and went and thought about it, like, why would he do it? That was hard work. And it occurred to me that What he was doing is similar to what maybe some of you have felt when you're the first one out on a lawn of fresh fallen snow. You want to go make your mark. Or you're the first person on the beach after the tide has gone out and it's all swept and it's pristine. And you want to drag a stick through it. It's that common experience of wanting to claim the area or claim or make your mark. And so I didn't get his media, but I think that's what he was doing, that he was claiming and making his mark on the landscape in the best way that he knew how. So there's the story. I think that's a common story. Side note, historically, up to the Middle Ages, artists have been recognized as being laborers. They worked with their hands. They got dirty. It was not seen as an academic or intellectual endeavor. They tend to be anonymous. We just don't know who they are because of that kind of framing. During the Renaissance, that starts to change. Artists are called creators, okay? Which is pretty significant because only God was a creator up until that time. Okay? So for artists to be suddenly bequeathed that status, it was pretty stuff. And I think that's there in the back of my mind. So, reasons why I do art is connected with that idea of making marks and creator. I think art is magical. Making art is magical. I think that you could take dirt and you put it on paper, and I have you all seeing buildings and landscapes and hillsides, and it's as magical as pulling a person's ear. Every time, it's still like that for me. And I tell my students that, and that's the sort of spirit that I want to pass on, that there's that wonder and awe. Dirt on paper, and I have you seeing these things. The other thing about art, I think it is a form of like Braille for me. Okay, so that I discover how something is put together stroke by stroke by stroke by stroke. And it really slows things down. And I started to understand or see things in a way that I don't see or understand with my mind or with my eyes. It just becomes more visceral. I lost my train there for a second. Okay, it also, by doing that slowed down process, it becomes, I start to build, and this is gonna sound really kind of goofy, but I start to build like a relationship with these things, almost as if they are living entities. So, I mean, the obvious one is the large triptych. I had that pinned up on my wall in my house. And I would get up in the middle of the night and go visit it. You know, just go and sit in front of it. And what's happening? What's new? What do you need? And have a kind of like relationship. And when all things are firing in all cylinders, I think that they respond to me. This is what I need to make this work. Or this is, no, you gotta go this direction. Or maybe I need to add a light source here. So it becomes a very living entity for me. And as all these thoughts came together this past month or so, I realized that art is like a bottom line essence for me. And you know this. and that I needed to understand my world. I needed to engage my world. I needed to reveal my world. So it's like breathing, which brought me to another realization that we need to breathe. But we take it for granted. Okay? Really, you can't spend the day going, oh, breath. I breathe again. I mean, you would get nothing done. Okay? And so you take it for granted. So my words of wisdom is that once you find your passion, and it will demand your attention, you have to nurture it. You have to be constantly aware of it. And you have to give it sustenance to exist. And one other set of word wisdom is I had a teacher once who observed that art, religion, and science, though I think all of the art, all forms of disciplines, really have a shared common goal. We are all looking for a better way or a better form. And where that form takes place in either, we're all looking for a better way. And I think what art brings to the table is trumpets blaring, celestial singing, stuff that we cannot consciously, rationally understand. And so when Emily had picked for something James Vincent does, I'm thrilled because he is practicing that magic, that transformation in his head to something that we're translating. And any kid will do that. And it's just that we have to be aware of letting that go. So, what I wanted to finish with, and I really like to read that, was to address any questions or you may have about the artwork. Or we can talk about the process of how I got somewhere. A few questions that have come up repeatedly is how long did it take the trip take? And all I can say is a long time. and a lot of pencils and a lot of erasers. And I think of it as a relationship with that one specifically because it did take so long. So you see bad times, bad lights, lots of good lights. And I have a real fondness for it. So I think it was very successful. It is based off of the overlook on 23 South between here and Kingsport. It is not a reproduction of that particular oversight. It just, I had buzzed by that sign half a dozen times, didn't see, it didn't look promising from the ride. So parked the car one time, got out, and just done. It just drops away and it kind of rolls. And so that was the inspiration for that piece. I've been asked for the pear and 2 sweet potatoes down there. That is from grad school. And I've been asked if the title Stonehenge was a mistake. And no, it was not. Both are meant for monumentality, that they both have a kind of largeness and quiet stillness that I was trying to achieve. The 3 images over there are based on the painting of the Nativity by Della Francesca. I just find the most perfect painting. And that'll change. I mean, in a couple of years, wasn't all it is, but right now, everything in that painting is just, there's a contrast. There's the singing angels, and there's Mary, who's in a quiet bubble of her prayer. So there's singing versus quiet. There's this sense that there's deep space being implied. You see the landscape beyond, but in the actual composition, everything is kind of parallel to the picture plane and fairly flat. So there's the 3D versus the 2D. There's a heavy emphasis on verticals and horizontals in the composition, but then you look closely and the ox is throwing back its head and brain, and Joseph is there and he throws his foot up over on his other knee, and we see the bottom of his foot. It's very casual, amen, sort of thing. So there's all these contrasts, which I find so exquisitely balanced, and I find it wonderful. Okay, any questions, comments, anything you want to hear more about? You don't know what a monoprint is? A monoprint is, there's several there, there's a small one there, there's a whole bunch of it there. It is a painting that is done on glass. You draw it, you paint it, you make your marks, you put a piece of paper on top, you pull it away, and you get one image. You will never get that print again because everything is squished and changed and whatever. So it is sort of spontaneous. It's not totally predictable. And I think it's a fun way to work. Questions?
Yeah, when I came in here last week, I was so struck by the diversity of what you do and what you've done. And I wonder, maybe this is not answerable really, because it sounds like it depends on where you are and what time of year and where you are from grad school all the way to now. But what is one of your favorite, what do you really enjoy?
Pencil for me, I don't think about it. It's like an extension of my finger. Like they just keep going, and I make marks. And with the color, you have to be more deliberate, more conscious. Does that balance things? And what kind of media do you have to use? And so there's more decision making. Whereas with pencil, I just never doubt it. I know what I'm doing. And I think it is sort of humble, and yet with some, there's a richness to it that has so many subtle variations. I'm a big fan of Rembrandt prints. I mean, that man could paint and draw with value. And okay, I'll do the first one. I mean, clearly I've made 4 eggs into some color. You sort of have to acknowledge it exists, so at some point, I'm going to take it on. But or black and white. I like ink also.
I have a question. You said art is a bottom line for you. It's like as necessary as breathing in some ways. But you also contrast that with the idea that like when little kids are making their marks, or I think you said practicing magic.
Yes.
Which I think is such a cool one. For you, when did that go from something to practicing magic to becoming a bottom line? When did that click for you?
That's a good question. I've been really well trained. I mean, I've gone to school and I've had some excellent teachers. And so there's a real awareness of acting in my background. And I'm not sure how to answer that. It probably is just sort of like sands. It goes through an hourglass and suddenly there's more on the bottom than there was at the top, and somehow it just shifts. I know as a teacher, I'm a big advocate that you got to learn the rules. You can break them left and right once you know them, but you have to know. It's like you need to learn the language before you can become eloquent. But I also tell them it's magic. So I want that awareness to be there. So that magic has to be founded on a real firm structure. But that's not the only goal. The trumpet blaring and the celestial singing is the final rule. But the academia will get you there, hopefully. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. What is this big picture right over here?
That is totally made up. The city is totally made up. I am also a big fan of the work of Edward Hopper. I really respond to I think he has a wonderful balance between geometry and realism and poetry. And so I made up the city of shapes that I liked, and there's some references to some of his paintings in there. But it's just like nighttime. I like the mystery of nighttime. There's the three small ones over there are all titled variations on Gotham City. And that's it. That's my only connection to Batman. And is the idea that Gotham City just sort of, I think, is intriguing. It's mysterious. It's dark. It's a little bit greasy. It also references where I grew up, was in Pittsburgh, PA, which was a steel town. And my grandmother used to call it a two-shirt town, meaning that by midday you had to change your shirt because you had pollution and all kind of crud on it. And there was, so there's that in there too. So that's just a bigger variation of some of the smaller ones. That idea of dark and mystery and stories that you can't see, but you know they're going on in there. And so, and I feel like, a lot of the stuff is meant to be like witnesses to something. And
now, you said that is a drawing right there.
the large one?
Yeah.
Yes.
When I walked in here, I said, well, I didn't know that was a dog. I didn't know that was a
I've had a few people say they thought it was a photograph. It's a drawing. One stroke at a time.
Now, frankly, I like the skill of doing something like that, but I don't comprehend a lot of modern all the time. I'm afraid. But I appreciate work like that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the wonderful thing about modern art, a lot of it is that it advocates for the individual vision. So that it talks about how people interpret their life and around it. But not everyone's going to get it.
I was wondering if you could go back to your earlier comments and build a little bit on that about your strategies and your approach to teaching, because I'm sure you've had some students come in who are absolutely impassioned for art and all of its forms. And then I'm sure you've had some students who have, exclaimed, I can't even draw a stick figure.
Well, you've been there. Yes. yes. I'm not sure why I'm here. I can't draw. And I try to reference them back to like looking at history and well, can you imagine something by Picasso? And they usually can, and they'll talk about the distorted figures. And all right, so fine. Now think about something by Leonardo da Vinci, the Mona Lisa. Okay, got that. And then we'll talk about like how they're both good. I mean, they've both been established historically as being good. So it has more to do with a kind of personal vision. And there's no one standard. And so you're not being able to draw the Mona Lisa. Okay, what can you draw? What is capable of? And there are a vast majority of a range of artists. The important stuff is being true to your vision and being true to what you want to say. And that's really hard. Learning how to draw a hand, it takes time, but that's not that hard. The hard is like, what do you have to say? What's important? What do you value? And I try to emphasize process more than product. That if we're just shooting for product, then you're done. Once you achieve the product, moving on to something else. Where if you're talking about process, then it talks about figuring out eloquence and figures out message and how that evolves over time as your experience changes you. And there's the lifelong work that you have to do. Sometimes it's an uphill road. Anybody else?
I have one last question. When you were talking about this kind of your work and your relationship with this piece of art and how you said it like slows things down line by line.
Right.
I mean, that feels like almost like an act of resistance to kind of the culture that we have, quick and hurried and instant gratification. And here you are line by line, and sometimes in the middle of the night staring at this painting, or this drawing, and asking what it means and all this kind of stuff. How did you over these years resist the push to go quick and instant and kind of be something that you're not? How did you stay in your kind of authentic self?
I think you don't have any choice. And you have to sort of live with yourself and wake up in the middle of the night, and you have to recognize who you are. And it's not always a good fit, I'll recognize that. But I just don't know that you have any choice. You are who you are. With Dr. Westgate here, I also would like to recognize that everything I said is also true of music, I do believe.
I believe you.
And that just like Zach with his lawnmower, I think we all have to find what our media is in terms of what as we explore this world in which we live. I appreciate you all coming. It's nice to talk about art. And it is nice to have an appreciative audience and to have my work engaged. The reception the other day was lovely because I really felt like I was seen, and that was a great experience. So I thank you all for listening. Any other questions? Comments? Words of wisdom?
Keep doing work.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, Oliver and Rembrandt are my big